primary doctor.
What was it in there? Can you give me your mouth? Maybe that's what it was.
Oh, gosh.
Something that was a little like,
Yeah, that would be hard too.
oof. I mean, bad no matter what, but
Yeah. Yeah. What are you doing? Greetings. I'm Norita Martin. I'm 84 years old, living in Tacoma, Washington, and for my family, I'm going to give you a little background history and my favorite memories. I was born in Washington, D.C. When I was 5, we moved to Maryland and bought an old house without bathroom. My dad and my Uncle Bud put a bathroom in where the pantry had been originally, so it worked out fine. In my memory, it's huge. But my brother has been back, and I know that it really is not very big. It was quite small, although it had 4 bedrooms. The favorite person, or the most outstanding person from my childhood, was an Englishman named Percy Payne. Percy was an Englishman and had come to the States to live with his sister, and that didn't work out. And there was a little tavern. Our house actually was on a dirt road, which was wonderful in the summer because we loved to go out in the mud when it rained in our bare feet. Wonderful feeling. And my Uncle Bud lived in Washington, but he came out weekends, and there was a little tavern about a mile down the Blacktop Road. And he used to stop at the tavern and have a couple of beers before he came to the house. Well, he ran into this Englishman who was sort of homeless, and after 2 or 3 meetings, in talking to Mother and to his mother, my grandmother, he brought Percy home, and Percy was with us for about 5 years. Now, Percy was tall, skinny, had no teeth as a result of injury in the war, and didn't want any, but he could eat everything. And my brother and I were like 7, 8 maybe, and we drove him crazy. And he cleaned and did windows and did heavy work around the house, and that's how he paid for his room and board. But Louis and I would aggravate him because he'd just finished vacuuming or mopping a floor, and we'd come in and he'd call us bloody, sooty bastards, get out of here, and we'd just go running. But Louis brought home a water moccasin one day, snake, that he found in the pond, which was about 2 blocks up the hill, still on a dirt road. And he had hit it, and he thought he had knocked it out or killed it. Well, he got it as far as the house and the front porch, and it was still not moving. He went in to get Mother to show her his prize, and about the time Mother hit the front door, the snake moved. Well, needless to say, it caused quite a commotion. But good old Percy came to the rescue. He got the baseball bat and just beat the dickens out of that poor snake. Percy did a lot of funny things. He went to the tavern every Saturday, and quite often Dad would have to go get him because he really wasn't in any shape to walk home. And Dad didn't seem to mind. He would go down and get him and bring him home. And when we'd call, the tavern would call, and when we knew Dad was going to go get him, my grandmother, Gram, would play tricks on Percy. One of her favorites was to either short sheet his bed, or she'd fill the bottom of the bed with hangers, and then we'd all stand outside his bedroom and wait to hear all the commotion when he tried to go to bed. He and Graham got to be quite good buddies. And then he had grown up in London, in the theater district, and so he and Mother would sometimes do scenes from Romeo and Juliet or that would seem to be their favorite. Mother would get up on a ladder, and that would be her balcony, and then Percy would be down here, and he'd be Romeo, and they were really, it was quite entertaining. You have to remember, we did not have TV, VDs, CDs, anything, DVDs. We didn't have any of those things. We had a radio and ourselves. Oh, we had an old phonograph, you know, the old 33s. But we had a lot of fun. One of our other favorite things to do was to have pretend funerals. And Graham was the instigator of this. And my dad always got to be the corpse. And so we'd lay him out on the floor in the living room and put some flowers in his hands. And then we'd march around him singing hymns. And Graham would always insist that we sing Protestant hymns. We didn't want to waste good Catholic hymns on this pretend. And then she'd sprinkle him with holy water, and we'd sing some more hymns. And Graham would always get so tickled. And one time I remember she got so tickled, she had a little bladder weakness, and Dad got not only water but something else sprinkled on him one time there, which we all were hysterical over. We moved from Maryland. Oh, I guess I didn't tell you. When we moved to Maryland, we were in a little tiny town called Tuxedo, Chevrolet. I don't even know if it's still on the map. It was only like a mile from the district line, so we were just outside of D.C. in the Bladensburg Road area. But my dad was in the service, so when the war started, he got transferred to St. Joseph, Missouri. And he didn't want us to stay on the coast so close to Washington, D.C. He felt we'd be safer in the middle of the country. So off we went to Missouri, which is where I finished my high school years. Hello, I'm Norita Martin. I'm 84 years old next week, and I'm very thankful for my long life, my great family, and my good health. I was born in Washington, D.C. in 1929, right at the beginning of the Big Depression. We were fortunate enough to be a two-income family because my grandmother worked, and so we were able, when I was 5, to buy a house in Maryland just a mile from the district line. I had a wonderful, happy, carefree childhood. But the most interesting person in my childhood was an Englishman named Percy Payne. And my uncle, who came down on weekends, sort of befriended Percy in the local tavern where he spent a good deal of time. And he decided that we should adopt him, which is what we did. So Percy came home with my Uncle Bud and lived with us for about 5 years until we moved to Missouri. Percy was quite a character, and he paid for his room and board by just helping Mom around the house. He'd wash windows and scrub floors, and he did the yard work and heavy things. But Saturday nights he had to go to the tavern, which was fine, but sometimes he was there too long, and then Dad would go and pick him up and bring him home. Now my grandmother was quite a prankster, so when this would happen, we would dash upstairs, and Grandma would either put hangers in the bottom of his bed, or she'd short sheet it, or something, whatever she could think of at the moment. And then when Percy went to bed, we'd all stand outside the bedroom door and listen, because there would be much English swearing going on in there and things being thrown around, which we all had a lot of fun with. Percy also, because he had grown up in London, really loved theater, and he and my mother used to do Romeo and Juliet scenes in the kitchen with Mom sitting on top of the ladder, and then Percy was down looking up at her, and he was Romeo. My other favorite thing that we did, you have to remember, we didn't have anything but a radio, and it wasn't always really good either, so we entertained ourselves. And in the winter, Graham started this. We used to have funerals, but we had Protestant funerals because we were Catholic, and so we had to have Protestant funerals. My dad was always the corpse, laid out on the floor with flowers and his hands crossed. We'd march around him singing Protestant hymns because Graham did not want us to be irreverent with anything that was Catholic, which we always thought was kind of funny anyway. And she'd sprinkle holy water on him and bless him, and then we'd march all through the house, sort of like a New Orleans ritual thing. But it was great fun. I remember I had lots of good memories. When I was about 11, 12, well, right after the war, Second World War started, Dad was transferred to St. Joseph, Missouri. They opened up an air transport command there, and he was in the Air Force. And he did not think it was safe for us to stay on the coast, especially so close to D.C. So we bundled ourselves up and moved to Missouri, which was quite a switch for me, going from D.C. in a big city to a small town in the Midwest. I remember we didn't have a car because we had a car, but we couldn't get gas because of the war. And so we took the bus everywhere. And the first time that a bus driver waited for me, when he saw me running for the bus, I couldn't believe it because that would have never happened in D.C. But I finished my high school there. This is also where my mother suddenly passed away. She was only 35. It was just a few days after my 16th birthday. And Dad was in England and couldn't get home right away. Anyway, when he did finally get home, we then had Mother buried. And then my uncle had a job in Maryland at the powder factory in Indian Head. And so Graham and my brother and I made the trip back to the coast, and we lived then with my grandmother and my uncle until I finished school. And when I finished high school, Dad was still by then he was in Germany, and he decided to have my brother and I come join him in Germany. My brother and I traveled to Germany by converted hospital ship in October of 1947. I had just graduated from high school. Louis was a junior. We were on our way to join our dad in Erlangen, which is in southern Germany in the Bavaria area. It was quite a trip. I was in a compartment, a huge big room with all these married women. And let me tell you, what I didn't know about sex and men being married, I sure knew by the time I got off that ship. It was pretty interesting. When we landed in Bremerhaven, it was my first glimpse of what a war-torn country looks like, and it was very upsetting for me. I remember seeing people fighting with each other to get to the garbage that was coming off the ship. It kind of put me in a whole different frame of mind. Anyway, we traveled on partly by train and went to Nuremberg. My dad met us in Nuremberg, and then we went to Erlangen. Now, while there, I met my husband, Frank Van Haren, and we were married sooner than we had expected to because Dad had got orders to go back to the States. So, but Van still had 2 years to go on his time there. So we finally decided to get married and stayed there because I was really enjoying Germany, which worked out quite well. I was in Germany when the Berlin Wall went up. That was very, pretty traumatic for any dependents that were there. You could fly home if you chose to. I decided not to because we knew that if anything happened, they were going to send all of us to Switzerland, and I thought Switzerland sounded a lot more interesting than Maryland, so I stayed. Van and I had our first home in a little place on a lake, Tegernsee, just outside of Bad Tolz. My first child was born in Munich. We went from Erlangen to Munich before we came home. This lovely piece next to me here is my wedding gown. You couldn't buy anything from anybody in Germany, and even our wedding rings, we collected up old gold jewelry from friends and took this paper lunch bag with old jewelry in it to the jeweler, and he made our rings from there. We came home from there in 52. I think that's right. And then ended up here in Washington State, again through the military. Lived in Lakewood for like 22 years, and then Van and I were divorced, and I remarried Duncan McLean, and we lived in University Place, and I stayed there. Duncan and I were married about 18 years, and then he passed away. I stayed here, and then 8 years later, I married again. And this lovely gown that is here next to me is what I wore. It's been made from a parachute because right after the war in Germany, you couldn't buy anything. And Van found this parachute, and we found a dressmaker. The lace came from a friend of hers off something of hers because there was just nothing in Germany. Because of when it was also made, there are no zipper on this dress. Everything snaps. I just am delighted in it. It's been a pleasure to have it, and I hope somebody will hang on to it for a while. Great-grandkids, great-granddaughters might get a big kick out of this. From then when we came home, Christine was born in Munich, and when she was 9 months old, then we came back to the States and ended up in Washington at Fort Lewis. And actually I've been here ever since, and that was 1955. Was after our second tour in Germany. Van and I were divorced. After divorcing Van, I met and married Duncan McLean, and we moved to his home in University Place. He was a delightful, charming man. The kids loved him. He didn't try to be a father. He was just a friend, and he was fun to be around. I lost Duncan in '93. I married again in 2001, married Marty Martin, who was also retired military. Seems like everybody in my family has been military. My brother, all my uncles. Anyway, we ended up in Florida after a couple of years of living in an RV and traveling across country. And I enjoyed Florida very much. I loved the way things grow. Flowers and any living thing have always been a big thing in my life. Flowers especially, I love them. I am now in an old little 2-bedroom house just around the corner from Mary. She helped me find it. I'm quite happy here. It's a nice little place. It's just enough for me. Now, did I talk about my dress? I didn't.
Yes, you did.
I did? Mm-hmm. Okay. This is, I'm supposed to have some words of wisdom for my family. Okay, family, I'm supposed to give you some words of wisdom. Well, I don't think I'm very wise. I've gotten through some tough things in my life. And the thing I've learned after all these years, it's the most important thing in the world is love. It really makes the world go round. You cannot judge. You cannot put yourself in someone else's shoes. So you must learn to love and accept people as they are and where they are in life. I'm very proud of my children. They've all done well. They are all good people, good adults, and they do give back to their community and to their children. They've raised good families, and it's a delight to see them as grandparents now. I hate to admit that I'm that old, but I am. So again, I would say, just learn to love and forgive and accept people where they are and as they are. I love all of you very much. Bye-bye. I have a whole bunch of fabric over there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to make pillows for the Oktoberfest church.
Well, that'll be nice.
Yeah. Oh, come on. What did I do here? I just made a big... So anyway, when I get the handle on these, I'm going to send one up to her. Sure, there. Good. And let's see if that'll help her a little bit. Her family is... There'd be
Two loops.
one here
Right.
with a ring through it.
Oh, okay.
And I'll cut, this will be, and then I'll just run the handle through the...
Through the ring.
What's going?
After my mother died, my dad decided, no.
Hi.